Hello and welcome to today's Sutta class. The Sutta today is the last one of the season before the monks go on their rains retreat. And so, the Sutta which I chose today is Sutta number 109. If you look at the end of that Sutta, when the Buddha first taught that Sutta, 60 people became fully enlightened. So that's why I'm giving this teaching today, to see if that can reoccur today. Maybe, have we got 60 people here? No, but maybe 6 or... So, for those who haven't got copies of the Sutta, you'd like to come up, I've got some photocopied copies. We've only got 12 here, so for those of you who are really interested, should get a book. Maybe some of you might have to share. Oh no, I think we've got maybe enough. So this will be very deep teachings. So, the Sutta, you'll see, is on page 887. We did that one because page number 2 is also page 888, which in the Chinese tradition is very, very auspicious. So, if you can't get enlightened on page 888, on one of the Buddha's suttas, I don't know what you can do. Are you all ready? Mahapunnama Sutta. Page 887, Sutta number 109. You ready? Okay, let's start. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So, talking about Sutta number 109, Mahapunnama Sutta. I've got one more book over here if someone wants to borrow a book. Does anyone want to borrow? Do you want to borrow a book? You are very lucky. You can borrow this one. I've got the page right there for you, number 109. Okay, so when you start looking at this particular teaching of the Buddha, 887, you may find later on that this is an example of a sutta where there was one of the Buddha's disciples who was fully enlightened, but he had 60 disciples, and it often happens, and I've seen this happen, sometimes done it myself, that even if you know the answer, you ask a question of the teacher just to elicit the answer for the benefit of somebody else. So here, the teacher of many monks was asking the Buddha a series of questions. Not that he didn't know the answer himself, but he wanted to hear the Buddha's explanation for the benefit of his own disciples. So sometimes when you ask a question, it may not be for your own benefit, but it may be the benefit of other people. So here we go. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in the eastern park in the palace of Migara's mother, which was quite close by to the Jeta grove. Migara's mother was no other than Visakha, the foremost female lay disciple of the Lord Buddha. She was called Migara's mother because Migara was actually her husband. She was a devout Buddhist from very early on in her life, and would always offer alms and go to the temple to offer alms, food, and to listen to the teachings of the Buddha. But when she got married, her husband wasn't a Buddhist. And so that he forbade her from giving alms to the monks. And so trying to figure out a way that she could teach her husband about Buddhism and the value of giving alms to holy monks like the Buddha, that she went around saying, oh, in our house we only eat old food. In our house we only eat old food. And when that got round to her husband, he was very upset. He said, what do you mean we only eat old food? Our servants get fresh food from the market every morning. We never actually keep anything. We don't eat old food. All our food is new. And of course this was just her trick. She was a very smart woman, a very, very wise disciple. She said, I don't mean the physical food. I mean the reason why we have enough money to buy this food and live in this nice house because of the karma from the past. we're not making any new karma. That's why we're only eating old karma food. That's what we're sustaining ourselves on, from the karma we've done in the past. We're not making any new stuff. That's why we're only eating old food. And to the husband's credit, he understood straight away what the meaning was. And he understood the benefit of making karma. So he said, please give alms food every day. I want to make some wealth for the future, as well as using up my old karma from the past. And from that time onwards, her husband said that my wife, she may be my wife in conventional terms, but my wife is my mother in the Dhamma. So she called her wife my mother in the Dhamma. And so when you say Megara Mata, the mother of Megara, Megara was her husband. She was a Dhamma mother of her husband. And so that became her name, which is used quite often in the text, Megara Mata. And the story of the palace of Megara's mother in the Eastern Park was a very interesting story, especially for the monks, because it comes in the Vinaya. Visakha she was going to a big celebration, and so she was all decked out in her best clothes and her jewellery. And of course, because her family was very rich, her jewellery was very, very elaborate and expensive. But as she was going to this big festival, this ceremony, this party, she passed by the Jeta Grove, and she thought, instead of going to the party, let's go and listen to the Buddha. So she didn't think it was appropriate to go into the monastery sort of dressed so seductively with all the jewellery. So at least she could take all her jewellery off. So she took all her jewellery off and sort of gave it to her servant, and they both of them went to the Jeta Grove and listened to this rip-roaring talk by the Buddha. And they were so inspired, they left just with their heads in the cloud really high, and she forgot all her jewellery, which was worth a fortune. And Ananda saw that jewellery there after Visakha had gone. And there was a rule that monks aren't supposed to touch anything valuable, not even jewellery, even if it's lost. And so he had to ask the Buddha, so what should I do? Somebody's lost this very, very expensive jewellery. If we leave it there, someone's going to steal it, and we're not really being responsible. But if we touch it, we're breaking our rules for actually picking up like gold, silver or money. And so the Buddha said, in the case that something is lost in a monastery, monks, you can pick that up, put that aside, and keep it for the owner, so when they come back. So you know that as a monk, I'm not allowed to take any money, to accept any money, to handle any money. But if you come to the monastery and you drop sort of $10 on the ground, that I can pick up and put it aside for when you come and collect it. It's one of the exceptions to the rule. For obvious reasons, because if I go to your house and you drop something or leave something, like a little clock or something, you'd expect that you'd look after it for me till I come back. And so the monks had to do the same. But however, so they picked up that jewellery and put it aside. I think they knew it belonged to Visakha. And when they told her, when she claimed it, she said, no, now if it's been dropped in such a holy monastery and been touched by a monk, I can't have it again. It must be yours. I'll give it to the monastery. And then the monastery said, well, what can we do with women's jewellery? So she said, I'll tell you what, I'll go and sell it. And for what we get from that jewellery, we'll build a little monastery, so I can make double merit. So she took around her jewellery, and according to the tale, that no one could afford it. So she decided to buy it herself. So she bought it herself. And having bought it herself, the money which was gained that way, she built the Eastern Park. She built the palace of Megara's mother in the Eastern Park. And the other interesting thing about that story is when she donated the money, kept with the steward, and told the Buddha that this is the money, it's a lot of money, we can build a nice monastery here. But she said, can I have one of your monks to oversee the building? And she asked for the Venerable Mahamoggallana, one of the chief disciples of the Buddha, to oversee the building. And I often quote that because sometimes you know that in our monasteries that monks, nuns do physical work, we do building. And I quote that this is actually from the time of the Buddha. The monks would also help out with the building. In this particular case, the building supervisor was Venerable Mahamoggallana. But there's one thing you should know about Mahamoggallana, that he had great psychic powers. And so they said that building was completed in amazingly fast time. Sorry? I think so, yeah. And I think the Serpentine is pretty well built. The nuns' monastery. We get all those buildings built before next week. So that's the story of Migara Mata, namely Visakha, and that palace in the eastern part. Now on that occasion, on the apostolic day of the 15th, on the full moon night, that's when the monks always meet together, and to recite the rules of discipline and also to listen to a talk usually. On the apostolic day of the 15th, on the full moon night, the Blessed One was seated in the open, surrounded by the Sangha of bhikkhus. Then a certain monk arose from his seat, arranged his upper robe on one shoulder, this is a mark of respect, and extending his hands in reverential salutation towards the Blessed One, as we still do today when you ask a question. Very often you put your hand up and say, Venerable Brahm, just like in the time of the Buddha. Extended his hands in reverential salutation towards the Blessed One, said to him, Venerable Sir, I would ask the Blessed One about a certain point, if the Blessed One would grant me an answer to my question. Sit on your own seat, monk, said the Buddha, and ask what you like. So the bhikkhu sat down on his own seat and said to the Blessed One, Are these not, Venerable Sir, the 5 aggregates affected by clinging? That is, the material form aggregate affected by clinging, the feeling aggregate affected by clinging, the perception aggregate affected by clinging, the formations aggregate affected by clinging, and the consciousness aggregate affected by clinging. Those are the 5 khandhas. So this is actually where the sutta is starting, with the 5 khandhas. Material form basically means the body, but also means other things in this physical world. The feeling does not mean the emotions, which is the other meaning of feeling in English. The feeling is that quality of every sense perception which is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And with each sense it has a different word. For example, what's pleasant we see with the eyes, we call it beautiful. What's unpleasant we call ugly. Same as through the sense of smell. What's a pleasant smell we call fragrant. An unpleasant smell we may call like rancid, or also a disgusting smell. But whatever is the pleasant or unpleasant aspect of every sense consciousness, whether it's seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, or touching. Obviously with touching it's like pleasure and pain. Whatever's unpleasant or pleasant, that's what we mean by Vedana, the feeling. That aspect of sensory experience which is pleasurable or painful. And we have perceptions, and those perceptions is actually the interpretation we give to reality. So as any psychologist would know, what we're actually experiencing in this moment is too much to really make sense of. So what our brain does, or the mind does, it selects that which is most important, and that's what registers in the mind. It's a selective process. We perceive very often only what we want to perceive, and sometimes what is too awful for us to see or to perceive, we just can't see it. So there's a lot of choosing goes into this thing called perception. And then we have the next aggregate, which is the formations aggregate, called sankhara. Now another reasons I gave this sutta today is because I'm lazy. I gave this same sutta on Wednesday night for our monks. And the formations, as some of the monks pointed out in question time, the dominant, the most central part of formations is something which the Buddha called cedana, which is like will, the doer. And one of our monks, or rather Anagaricus this year, Wailun, he's from Singapore, and he was actually checking this and checking in that he's got a Chinese dictionary of the Sanskrit Pali terms translated into Chinese. And he showed me that the Chinese character for sankhara is will. So the Chinese who translated those texts some maybe 1500 years ago, or maybe sort of between 2000 and 1500 years ago, they actually just straight down the line, accurate translation, they translated this 4th khandha directly as will. Or, in that dictionary, he underlined with pleasure, doing. This is where my famous doer and doing come from. And the last aggregate, consciousness. Consciousness is defined here, this fifth aggregate, as the 6 classes of consciousness. So 6 different types of consciousness. Seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, smell consciousness, taste consciousness, touch consciousness, and mind consciousness. Knowing that each one has a different flavour to it. Obviously the most dominant of all of those is the mind consciousness. So those are the 6 types of consciousness. What I call the knowing. So these are the 5 khandhas here, and the Buddha actually made these 5 khandhas a central part of his teaching scheme in order actually to analyze this thing we call the body and mind. Later on, he actually calls this body with its mind, with its consciousness. And there are many ways which we can analyze this thing which you call you, but we analyze it in this particular sense. It's just one possibility, one way of cutting the cake. You can cut it in many other ways. We analyze it in this way for a particular reason. And the reason was made clear later on in the sutta. The reason is because these are 5 places where either we can make a self, a soul from, any of these places, where we attach to this as being me, or attach to it as being mine. For example, still to this day, many people still take their body as being essentially them, and feel that in, say, the Christian religion, the fundamentalist Christian religion, feel that one day at the end of the world they'll be physically lifted up into heaven with their body as it is. And with their body will go their arthritis, will go their irritable bowel syndrome, because if their body goes, their bowel goes as well. So people identify with being their body. Still very many people do. So say, look at your body, we'll analyze it later on, but that's one place where you look upon yourself as being me. And obviously the Vedana, this pleasure or pain, beauty and ugliness, which comes with every sense object, very often we take that as being mine, in the sense that we can control this, that we have a responsibility for this, which is obviously we spend most of our time trying to actually to control our feeling, this Vedana, this pleasure and pain in our life. Always searching for the pleasure, running away from the pain. That is called craving. And we have the perception, which the Buddha focused on, because this is where delusion starts to come from. Because we perceive not what's really there, we perceive what we want to perceive. Which, as I often give the simile, perhaps the most easy simile to understand, because many of you are reasonably old. When you fall in love, your perception of that wonderful person you're going to spend the rest of your life in is that she or he is the most wonderful person in the world. You see what I mean by delusion? And then there comes a time later on where you can't stand them, where you want to get divorced, or sometimes people want to kill their partner. And that too is delusion. You can't see anything right in them. You can only see the worst part. You're denial to everything which is good in them because of anger and ill will. So this perception needs to be really analysed and looked carefully, because that's where delusion comes from. Okay, so you've got some attachment coming from the body, some ownership, craving coming from Vedana, delusion coming from perception, and these last 2 are the favourite culprits for the sense of a me. The fourth is formations is the doer, that which is in control, what you think's in control. Who brought you all these people from Penang? Who brought you all the way from Penang to here? You didn't come. The controller, the doer, made you come. Who decides to turn their head? Was that you? This is called the doer. This is sankhara. Dependent origination, they call it karmic formations, the doing. And of course, many of us, those of you who have heard me teach before, we assume that's me. You assume that there's a you in control. And the Buddha says, I'm sorry, it's not. We come to that in a few moments. And lastly, consciousness, the knower. Where the Buddha analyzes that and sees that there's nothing there. The consciousness is just a process. It's not me, not mine, not a self. These are the 5 khandhas. And another place the Buddha gave these beautiful similes, bringing this idea down to earth, where he taught that the body is just like foam on the Ganges. He was standing by the Ganges in flood, and there was this bubbles of foam stuck together on the Ganges. He said, that's all the body is. There's nothing substantial there, just bubbles and emptiness. He looked on Vedana, and Vedana, that was he saw a raindrop fall on a puddle. Plop! It appears in a moment, and then it's gone. That's old Robert Burns' poem. Pleasures are like poppies spread. You pluck the flower, the bloom is shed. Or like the snowfall in the river, white for a moment, and gone forever. That's Scottish forever. If you do it with the right, it probably is anyway. If you do it with the right accent, it rhymes. But anyway, I don't know much about Scots accents, but never mind. You can see the idea of a snowdrop in the river. It's plop and it's gone. And that was the idea of these Vedanas. And perception was a mirage. What you're actually seeing is something real there, but you're giving it a meaning it doesn't deserve. You see a rainbow in the sky, and if you're a child, you think there's something there, you run towards it, thinking for the pot of gold at the end of perception's rainbow. And next one is the formations of will. And the Buddha described that as a plantain tree, which is like the banana tree. It's got no solid core to it. But you can't beat the adaptation of that great monk, Venerable Gunaratana, who's been here many times, who said it was like an onion. Because an onion too, you can peel it, and you get to the centre, there's nothing there. But also with an onion, as you peel it, you cry a lot. It's called suffering. And not more than that, he said, using the pun on the word onion, an onion goes on and on with an I in the centre. O-N, I, O-N. Which is a very beautiful way of looking at it. But it's the idea, there's nothing substantial in there. And last, the consciousness. The consciousness, the Buddha said, is like a magician's trick. That's what he said for consciousness. That's Maya. Maya was a magician, a trick. So this knower, he said, is a trick, a magician's trick. That's actually in the Khandha Samyutta, if you ever want to read that up. So those are the 5 khandhas. So the Buddha said, these monks are the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. That is, the material form, feeling aggregate, perception aggregate, formations aggregate, consciousness aggregate, affected by clinging here. This is called upadana. And to make it much clearer, I use the alternative meaning of upadana, which is very, very valid, which is fuel. An uptaking. Upadana literally means taking up. And it's also used as a fuel. A fuel for a fire is the upadana for the fire. So this is affected by fuel. The 5 khandhas which are fueled. That's an important actually idea. It would be much better if Venerable Nyanaponika, who translated this, added that interpretation there, because it really opens up the sutta and gives it really full meaning. Because when the thing has got fuel, straight away the people in the time of India would have understood, when that fuel runs out, so does the fire. It implied implicitly the impermanence of these 5 khandhas. They're fueled, they've got a source, and soon we'll find out what that source is. But so far, any questions about the khandhas? Yeah.
Is it fair to say that
this is actually how the Buddha explained Vedana, mostly by the names we give. But as you know, in meditation, you can get beyond those names and just go to the feeling. So you're still perceiving, but in a much more subtle way. 99% of perception is giving it a name. That's Chris over there, male, Australian. I'm giving you names. That's usually how we make sense of what we're experiencing. But it's also how we choose some aspects of you to actually to focus on. Correct. Okay. Now when okay. Now another point with these 5 khandhas, they're just aspects of one sensory experience. They are indivisible. They're just aspects. Just like this stick has got size, it's got sort of weight, it's got colour, and it's got, I don't know what else it's got, but it's got different aspects. But you can't just take the size out, you can't just take colour out, you can't just take like weight out. You know, these are all part of this thing I'm holding here. This is how we analyse things, we take just part of it out. So the 5 khandhas, they don't exist in and of themselves. They're a way of analysing what we call sensory experience, or this thing we call life, or me. So whenever there is, say, material form and consciousness, there'll always be these other things. Whenever there's consciousness, say, there'll always be Vedana, this feeling, there'll always be perception, there'll always be mental formations, always be consciousness somewhere around there. As you know, when you're conscious, you have to be conscious of something. If you're conscious of something, then you are conscious. No, good. So in that sense, you're still perceptions happening there, but a different type of perception. It is less deluded, but it's still conditioned from the past. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Yes, okay. Well, that's actually seeing like a series of like moments of consciousness, a series of sensory experiences, the flow of life. And when you're doing that flow of life, you can see that at any particular moment, each one of those khandhas are there, but sometimes you can focus on one more than the other. And maybe one becomes a dominant feature. So if I keep carrying this, the dominant feature becomes its weight. If I keep carrying, that's the one I'm most concerned about. But if I'm an artist, it may be like the shape is the dominant one. So when we're actually experiencing, one or more of those khandhas can be like dominant. And this is what the Buddha was saying, that sort of you can actually see sort of a causal sequence between the dominant features, sort of in a whole sort of what we might call like a storyline of consciousness. So, you know, we have our perception. You know, why did he ask that question? And I start sort of thinking of proliferating. He's just trying to be clever. Why is he trying to say that for? And then you can actually build up this whole story about it. And that's what we're saying there with perception. If you buy into it, can actually create a whole cognitive process, which because from the very start it's been flawed, it leads to anger, ill will, craziness. All because it started from like a perception which was possible, but maybe improbable, but certainly not sort of certain. And you built up a whole cognitive process about that, and got angry.
Is that then the picture that you build up from the initial perception, the information? In other words, you can see, well, why do you ask that question? And then you start proliferating, as you said.
Yeah, you are doing.
You like crazy or
Good. Good, that's right. The point is that there's a doing there. The mind is moving. It's creating thought, and that thought will eventually create actions. So that's another causal sequence. But that's not within 5 khandhas. It's this bunch of 5 khandhas leaving on a whole storyline of khandhas. Yeah.
What about being/doing the same thing?
Yeah, you know that. So, to be is to do. To do is to be. And that was, I can't resist this old joke. To be is to do. This was on the wall of the philosophy department of Cambridge when I was a student there. I saw it there. To be is to do, I think was Descartes. To be is to do. Turning around the other way around was Jean-Paul Sartre. And the great American philosopher, Frank Sinatra, summed it all up with doobie doobie doo. But that being, if you just sat there and you didn't do anything, we think you're dead. You don't be anymore. So not only do other people recognize that because you move, because you do, because you react, therefore you are. And that's actually when you're in a coma, the doctors will try and get you to react, to see if you're doing anything. When you put sort of lights in your eyes, or whether they tap you on the shoulder, on the knee rather. If you don't do anything, they think you're gone. So doing and being are so close together. Doing is the function of the self. If it hasn't got a function, it ceases to exist. And it's actually very easy philosophically. If something doesn't do anything, then it doesn't exist. It's tantamount to it's not being anymore. Which is why in the God-centered religions, the idea of just a God starting the universe off, kick-starting it, and then sort of not interfering for the rest of the so-called creation, then the God becomes meaningless. It's died. And that's why that in many of the theistic religions you always have to have a God interfering from time to time. You have to have acts of God. Otherwise, God doesn't be anymore. It's died. To be is to do. Yes, it's another way of looking at it. It is the mental formations and, yes, certainly the doer actually going out into the world. Making things. Going out. Yes. That's another word. Okay, let's go back to the next. Is there any other questions, first of all, on khandhas? I spent some time on that one because that's important, because that's a fundamental part of this sutta. So, saying, "Good Venerable Sir," to the Buddha, the bhikkhu delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One's words. Then he asked him a further question. "But, Venerable Sir, in what are these 5 aggregates affected by fuel rooted? What's their cause?" Actually, the word they use, mula, literally means like the root, the source of things. And the Buddha said these 5 aggregates affected by fuel are rooted in desire. Now the word desire here is not craving, it's a word called chanda, which is also has the meaning of approval, consent. And that's a far softer meaning of desire. Because in English, when we look at the word desire, we think of something far more strong than just tacit approval. But the Pali word here does mean even tacit approval. Because you approve of these khandhas, even if you don't desire them, you think, okay, it's fair enough, they can be there. That's enough to keep them going. You approve of it. Okay, good enough, she'll be right. They'll keep on going. This is actually where we can actually see that something called upekkha, equanimity, is not strong enough to get you off samsara. There's something else coming in a few moments at the end of the sutta. So, which is an opposite of approval. Literally, I disapprove. There's a negativity towards the 5 khandhas, which was coming up soon. They use that same word, desire, chanda, in the monks' discipline, rules of discipline. If there's a meeting of the Sangha, and the monastery is run as a pure democracy, it's one of the earliest democracies. Democracy did not start in Greece. There was a parallel democratic system 26 centuries ago, well formed already in India, and there was no connection at that time between those two areas. So democracy appeared, almost at the same time in those two separated places. And because that's when Buddhism started, the Buddhist Sangha has like a very beautiful form of democracy, which means all the monks who live in that monastery have to be present. But if I can't be there for a decision for one reason or another, I can give my approval. I just go ahead. I trust you. It must be okay. That's the same word here as desire, chanda. I give my consent. And that's what it means here. It's not just you desire for these khandhas to keep going on, just you consent to them. Not being real, but to existing. Yeah. Okay. So they're rooted in just approval and existence. Now, Venerable Sir, is that clinging, or let's take it to that other word, is that fuel the same as these 5 aggregates affected by fuel, or is the fuel something apart from those 5 aggregates affected by fuel? Now we've moved on to 888. So this is a very fortunate page. Monk, that clinging, or that fuel, is neither the same as these 5 khandhas affected by clinging, nor is the clinging something apart from those 5 aggregates affected by fuel. It is the desire, this is the chanda, the approval, and the lust, which is a much stronger form of desire. In regard to these 5 khandhas, that is the fuel there. Now you can understand, he's saying what the fuel actually is, what keeps it going, which is the desire and the lust. Here, let's change it from desire to the consent, the approval, and then the lust, the wanting. That's what that's the fuel which keeps these 5 khandhas going. And of course, the reason why it's not the same, not different, is because that fuel is part of the 5 khandhas. That fuel manifests as the doing, the sankharas. Do you get it? Feedback loop, yeah. The khandhas create their own fuel. So therefore the fuel is not different, nor is it the same. So now of course if the khandhas are self-sustaining, how can we actually get out of this? Of course this is where the Buddha's coming soon. But now he's saying, can there be diversity in the desire and lust regarding these 5 aggregates affected by clinging? There can be, monk, the Blessed One said. Here, monk, someone thinks thus. Now this is great because this actually says what desire and lust is. There can be, monk, the Blessed One said. Here, monk, someone thinks thus. May my material form be thus in the future. May my body be like this in the future. Someone thinks thus. May my feelings, my pleasure and pain, be thus in the future. May my perception be thus in the future. May my formations be thus in the future. May my consciousness be thus in the future. Thus there is diversity in the desire and lust regarding these 5 aggregates affected by clinging. How many of you, when you meditate, say, oh, may my consciousness be like in jhana. May my perceptions be free from all these sounds, which all these people coughing and moving. And may my Vedana be just the bliss of jhanas in the future. As Buddha says, straight ahead, that's called desire and lust. That's the cause of this thing keep on going on. So that's why I've been, I don't know how many years. And when you're meditating, stop wanting. Stop expecting. And number 2, you see it in here, may this khandha or that khandha be thus in the future. All desire and lust is about what's going to happen next. So if you get a little bit of present moment awareness and you let go of the future, desire and lust, they can't survive. You've undermined them. You've gone to a place where they can't exist. That's why the more you get into the present moment, desire and lust stop. Mindfulness occurs. And just the whole process starts to deepen in your meditation. You're going not to supporting more khandhas, because desire and lust what's the fuel of these khandhas? You're cutting off the fuel supply. That's why things start to disappear. When you don't have any desires like that, first of all the body disappears, then the senses disappear, and if you stay long enough like that way, the mind disappears. Yeah. Yeah. It's in the khandhas like a virus in a computer. Yeah, you could say it's the karmic because that's your inclinations from the past. You've been cultivating that. But there is a way out. The antivirus discovered by the Buddha is called Dhamma. Oh yeah. It is. It's only slightly different. Because after a while, so the metta realize, may all beings be, we actually do this chant sometimes, may all beings, every time you come to the monastery we give a chant, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you have strength, may you be beautiful, may you have long life. It's a silly thing to say. Who wants to live a long life? And you know they can't always be happy. Really, if we're really getting down to it, just sort of be honest and say, sort of, may you become enlightened, may you stop messing around. But may all beings be happy and well. When will that happen? So you can't say may all beings be happy and well, but you say may all beings sort of be happier, maybe better. That's about as far as you can go. Yeah, go on. Aha, what happens? Notice that the khandhas disappears. That conscious moment just before the khandhas disappear. You can't know it has disappeared. You know it's disappearing. The mind knows, or rather the knowing knows. That's the job of the knowing. The knowing knows it's disappearing. And then it's gone. When the objects of knowing are gone, the knowing is gone. For example, it's not in this book. It's in the Nidana Samyutta, Sutta number 61. I looked it up the other day. Nidana Samyutta, the Samyutta Nikaya, the section, chapter number 12, Sutta number 61. Is that one? I'm not quite sure now. But anyway, it says that when, like Nama Rupa, the objects of consciousness, with Nama Rupa, the objects of consciousness cease, so does the mind. The mind is gone. Yeah. Consciousness is gone. Oh, sometimes they know, it's a subconscious knowing. Some of you have dreams. Sometimes you can remember those dreams. Sometimes the sound wakes you up. There's almost like a little knowing, like a cat when you're sleeping. The senses aren't fully turned off. That's why it's a bang and you wake up. But in deep meditation, the mind is actually knowing the mind. The consciousness, only mind consciousness is left. That's why that's the mind. The sound sense is truly turned off. That's why there's an explosion that you can't be reached in the deep meditations. But in the last, the deepest of meditations, which is called the cessation of all that's perceived and experienced, there the mind is stopped. But not fully. Not permanently. It comes back again afterwards. That's only a temporary nibbana. But in full nibbana, as you will see in a moment, everything stops. Okay. But, Venerable Sir, in what way does the term aggregates, khandhas, it means just a group of things, in what way does the term aggregates apply to these khandhas? Basically, he's asking, what actually are these? How far does it extend? Monk, any kind of material form whatsoever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. This is what we mean by the material form khandha. Any kind of feeling whatever. I'm just going to fill in the dots. Any kind of feeling whatever, past, present or future, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is called the feeling aggregate. Any kind of perception whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is called the perception aggregate. Any kind of formation or will whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is just called the formations aggregate. Any kind of consciousness whatever, any kind of consciousness, any kind of knowing whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, you might say individual or cosmic knowing, or cosmic consciousness, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the consciousness aggregate. It is in this way, monk, that the term aggregate applies to the aggregates. So saying here that this is the whole of consciousness, the whole of will, past, future, present, far and near, the whole works, the whole of perception, the whole of happiness, unhappiness, any place where there's that type of experience, the whole of things, material form, including in these five aggregates. That's how far these aggregates apply. Yeah, that's right, yes. So this is they're sustaining themselves. But the meaning here, the main purpose, is the Buddha was making sure that there's nothing which you could call consciousness or will or happiness or pain or perceptions or things which could possibly in any which way fall outside his five aggregates. That's right, yeah. He just defines it in such a way that no one can actually think that, there must be some type of consciousness outside of this, or some sort of happiness, not of the five khandhas. Yeah, that's external, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but the main purpose is that mind is just part of consciousness. It's not outside. Anything which has consciousness, or which can be known by consciousness, anything has to be within these five khandhas. So, if anyone says, is there anything outside these five khandhas? Yeah, you may say there is, but it hasn't got consciousness. It doesn't know. It doesn't feel. It doesn't do anything. As I mentioned earlier, if something doesn't know, if it doesn't do anything, doesn't feel any pleasure or pain, it doesn't exist. To be is to do. It doesn't do anything, it doesn't know anything. It's just like a lump of wood. That was a Buddha's simile, I think Mahapunnama Sutta. Aha, so hopefully I'm getting you worried now. That's halfway on the path to being enlightened. What is the cause and condition Okay, now saying how extensive these are, what makes these things come up into being, the cause and condition? What is the cause and condition, Venerable Sir, for the manifestation of the material form aggregate? What is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the feeling aggregate? What is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the perception aggregate? What is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the formations aggregate? What is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the consciousness aggregate? Now, straight away, by saying manifestation, means something appearing in the world. If it appears in the world, it's already assuming that it cannot be in the world. It's come out of nothing and suddenly it's manifested. Why is it manifested? This whole idea of causes and conditions shows that when that cause and condition is taken away, so is the effect. So consciousness is manifesting. And as you all know, if it can manifest, it can unmanifest. It can stop. When the causes cease, so does the effect. That's the whole purpose behind the Buddha's causality. When you see these things, and see these things are caused, they come about because of some other reason. They're not inherently self-existing. It means that when the cause goes, so does the effect. They are, in a word, anicca. So let's look what the causes are of these things, and it's quite obvious. The four great elements, monks, are the cause and condition for the manifestation of the material form aggregate. That's just your body. Contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the feeling aggregate. The senses have to be stimulated to have the Vedana. And contact is also the cause and condition for the manifestation of perception, stimulation of the senses. Because the senses, number one, the sense basis can be taken away, you can be blinded, you can lose your hearing. Because of those realities, you can see that you need the sense base, the apparatus, you also need to have it stimulated. If you close your eyes, you don't see anything. You need the contact to have perception. Also need the contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the formations aggregate. Because will is a reaction to a sensory experience. Without that sensory experience, then there's no reaction. The will doesn't happen. The choice, what am I going to do with this? If you haven't got any this, you've got no choice. If the supermarket shelves are empty, you've got no choice. And mentality, materiality, that's the old nama rupa. Basically, the objects of consciousness. Mentality, materiality is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the consciousness aggregate. Things to be conscious of is a cause for consciousness. When there's nothing to be conscious of, then consciousness ceases. That's what we do in the arupa attainments. Take away all the things to be conscious of. Space, infinity of space, infinity of consciousness. You come to nothingness. You're conscious of nothing. But that's still something to be conscious of until the nothingness disappears. And then neither perception or non-perception. And then that disappears. There's nothing else to be conscious of. Therefore, consciousness ceases. That's the whole purpose of the immaterial attainments. To see how even consciousness can come to an end. The knowing stops. So, the reason the Buddha put this down here, because it shows that this thing which we call body is not always going to be there. Therefore, it can't be me, it can't be mine. Even if you do get transported physically up to heaven, it won't last. Feelings don't last. Drops of, like a drop of rain in a puddle. Perceptions don't last. They're just caused by contact. They're conditioned. There's a cause, a reason behind it. Not you. Will has got a reason behind it. It's not you doing it. They've got other causes and conditions. See, the cause and condition of will is not me, the self. You didn't decide. It's just contact. And consciousness has its causes. When those causes are taken away, consciousness stops. So you can't be the knower. You can't be the doer. You are not the one looking at me now. You are not the one listening to me now. That's just this process called the 5 khandhas. Okay? I love this. Okay, what does it say there? 13, 14, I'm getting there, getting close. Here we go. 1040. In the material form aggregate, each of the... I'll just go into the notes. Those of you who got the printed copy there, because we had a spare page on the back, I'll put these notes on for change. In the material form aggregate, each of the 4 great elements is a condition for the other 3 and for derived material form. Basically, they're saying that in the 4 aggregates, you can't have just one without the other. They're all sort of... One is dominant. Yeah. Contact is conditioned for each of the 3 middle aggregates. As I said, contacted one feels, monks. Contacted one perceives. Contacted one wills. So what I was saying before, once contact is the senses being turned on. So I've also got here the one wills here as being the most dominant of the mental formations. The commentary explains that at the moment of conception, the material form phenomena and the 3 mental aggregates that arise are the mentality, materiality that is a condition for the rebirth process, consciousness. Okay, that's a bit. Okay, this is actually looking at, again, the commentary. You've got to be a bit careful here, but it's quite okay that when, so they say, when a person gets reborn, saying what actually gets reborn first? Is the consciousness first or the objects of consciousness first? And some suttas say, they say the consciousness descends into the mother's womb. Whereas the next sutta says the namaruta, the objects of consciousness, descend into the mother's womb. Because the two go together. You can't have one without the other. So that they descend into the room. What they got here? At the moment of conception, the material phenomena and the 3 mental aggregates that arise, are the mentality, materiality that is a condition for the rebirth consciousness. In other words, they bring the consciousness in, or the consciousness brings those in with it. They have come together. During the course of life, the physical sense faculties and the sense objects, together with the 3 mental aggregates, are the mentality, materiality that is a condition for sense consciousness. The same thing. Rebirth consciousness, sense consciousness. I think many of you may have seen in those newspaper about those pictures of babies in the womb. And their consciousness, they seem to be conscious. They're walking, sucking their thumb much earlier than anybody thought. They're conscious much earlier than anybody thought. Maybe they're conscious, as many people remember, actually when they go into their mother's womb. Fully conscious. No, to all realms. Yeah. For the... okay, that's a good question. For the heavenly realms, the material form is called the fine material form. So it's... Actually, they don't really say that. They call it like almost like a... But the best thing is to say is that when people have actually seen ghosts, because some people have seen devas, heavenly beings, but more people have seen ghosts than heavenly beings, and that's an example of fine material form. It's where such a fine material form, because it's fine material, that's why it can pass through doors. You can float above the ground. There's people who've seen ghosts do that. That's actually one of the signs of a ghost. When they walk, they're not touching the floor, and they think, "Oh, not ghosts like us, yeah." So it doesn't go into more detail than that, and I haven't really investigated that myself. But just like a finer material form, but still the same. It's the same process here. Okay. So we're going deeper into this now. Now, having described what the 5 aggregates are, now he's saying what personality view is. The sense of a me, a mine, a self. And this is important because this is the key. The Sakaya Ditti, that's what it says personality view. Sakaya Ditti is the main fetter, the hindrance, which stops you becoming a stream winner. Seeing through, overcoming Sakaya Ditti means that you're on the path to enlightenment. 7 lifetimes, that's all you have left at most. So it's a fundamental piece of understanding to know what Sakaya Ditti is, to know what the big obstacle is. The self-view, the personality view. What is it you have to get up, get away, get rid of, abandon, to actually to get into the stream and be certain for Nibbana? Venerable Sir, how does Sakaya Ditti, one of the first of the 3 fetters, come to be? Here, monk, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones, these are other enlightened beings, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for, instead of true men, I call it like superior persons, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma. They regard material form, this first khandha, as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form, or regards feeling, perception, will, consciousness, each one of these khandhas, as either, number 1, as a self, that is me, that is the self, I am the doer, I am the knower, I am the body, that's the first one. Or number 2, as the self as possessed of material form or of feeling. It's the self which knows, or it's the self which has a body, it's the self which feels, the self which perceives, the self which does, the self which knows. That's number 2. These things as self as possessing these things, or possessed of those things, or material form as in self, any of this body as in this big self, or feeling, perception, sort of doing, or consciousness, as actually contained in this super self. Yeah, we're all this doing is part of a greater self. And the last one, or as self as in these things, as contained in them somewhere. Somewhere, in the body is the self. So that's why people look here, is the self in the heart, or is it in the brain, or is it somewhere else? Or sort of is feeling, there's a self is somewhere in the middle of your feeling, or in the middle of your perception, or in the heart of doing, or right in the middle of knowing, there is a self. He called these Sakaya Ditti, which is wrong view, what you have to abandon to become an enlightened one. So again, the Buddha was getting all possibilities, so there's no escape. You can't say there's a self anywhere there. There's no possible way of getting out of the argument. He's left no loophole. Not even a lawyer could actually find a way through that. Yeah. 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 The self is in your experience. No, in the experience is not in the self. No, the experience is not the same as the self. No, the self is not possessed of experience. No, it doesn't leave any any other possibility. All possibilities, all avenues of self-existence are closed off. So at least, if you don't agree with that, you don't believe in that, at least you know what Sakaya Ditti is. What has to be abandoned to be a stream winner. Any other questions? Yeah? And absolutely. There is 2 reasons to overcome that non-self. First, if you actually know what that non-self is, it's called paratagosa, the words of another. So you know what the teaching is. Number 2, there has to be alongside yonisamanasikara, work of the mind which goes to the source of things, the source of this illusion. You need the two together. Here you're getting one of them. The words of another. That's all the Buddha could do to teach this Dhamma. That's not enough. You have to follow that. Yonisamanasikara. If you follow that to its source and see the truth of that, then you've overcome Sakkaya Ditthi. The two go together. I say so, yeah. But I think in the time of the Buddha, people maybe had much more faith in the Buddha, and the hindrances could have been overcome. And maybe because of the power of the Buddha teaching this, that was enough. They could actually follow this to its obvious conclusion. They wouldn't sort of resist, because there was a powerful Buddha there. And they'd actually see what the Buddha was pointing to. See the emptiness of these 5 khandhas. Part of meditation. That's when actually you hear this, the paratagosa, and yonisamanasikara, work in the mind which goes back to the source of things. That's meditation. You go deep, closer to the source of the emptiness. You can't miss it. Oh, of course, yeah. Because we waste so much energy. And most of the energy is wasted on fruitless doing. And we're just too active for sort of stupid purposes. That's why when many people die, all this work they've been doing, for what? What have you really achieved in your life? So a lot of your doing sort of is pointless. So you restrict your doing. And then sort of you're much more efficient. So whatever you do has got more power. You have more energy, you're not wasting so much energy, which is what we do. So a lot of holy people, they're just incredible amounts of energy. I mean, how on earth can they do that? You should have an inclination of why they can do that. They're not wasting energy. Yeah. Just about, yeah. The Eightfold Path is the only way. The Eightfold Path, and meditation is the end. The 8th factor, the culmination of the Eightfold Path. Okay, shall we go on? Yes, Wayne? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, remember, he rediscovered it. So there's a path already there. Yeah. And this is one of those wonderful little points. I have to put this on the web one day. Because everybody knows, it's part of all traditions, when the Buddha became enlightened, the first thing which he did was actually to remember his past lives. And it's very well known that one of his most recent past lives was under Kassapa the Buddha, where he was a monk. The previous Buddha, he was a monk with the previous Buddha. And he's supposed to remember all those previous lives in all his details. If you were born with a Buddha, or knew a Buddha before, that would be an amazing part of your life. That would be perhaps the most important part of your life. And you certainly remember that. So I can't see that how Siddhartha Gautama Buddha could have not remembered the Four Noble Truths before his enlightenment. No. That's why another important point which somebody pointed out to me, it's like in the Dhammacakka Sutta, the wheel of the Dhamma. He said this wheel has been started moving and it will never be stopped. The wheel started moving a long time before the Buddha. You can't stop it. You can't, no. It's always moving. The Buddha just sort of gives it that big push. And the arahats keep on pushing it. Once started, can never stop. It's beautiful simile. So, even when so-called Buddhism dies out in the world, Still there's other beings who would have been born in the time of the Buddha or afterwards, would have heard these teachings. And when they sit under some sort of tree or whatever they meditate, they remember the time. And then because of that memory, they have the power to gosa, the words of another. And they use the power of their meditation to go back to the source. Those two together cause their enlightenment. And then the wheel is giving another big push. But it never stops. Okay, let's get going. But Venerable Sir, how does personality view not come to be? How do we stop it? Here, monks, a well-taught noble disciple who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in the Dhamma, who has regard for superior men and is skilled and disciplined in the Dhamma, does not regard material form, feeling, perception, doing, knowing as their self, or self as possessed of these things, or these things as in self, or self as in these things. The opposite, they don't regard. They know that self is not there, that the knowing is not a self, that self doesn't know, it's not a self which knows, the knowing is not in the self is not in the knowing, or in the doing, or in the feeling, or in the perception, or in the things. That is a definition of a stream winner. Also, definition of a once returner, non-returner arahat. But those other stages have got a little bit more. Minimum requirement to be a noble one. Okay, so why do we sort of approve of these 5 khandhas? With his approval, that's why it becomes a self. Because we possess them, we want them, we know them. We want them to be. That's me. What, Venerable Sir, is the gratification? What is the danger? And what is the escape in the case of these things? In these 5 khandhas. The pleasure and joy, monk, that arise in dependence upon material form. I can just go through this quickly. The pleasure and joy that arise in dependence upon material form. The pleasure and joy that arise in dependence on Vedana. The pleasure and joy which arise in dependence on perception. The pleasure and joy which arise in dependence of will. The pleasure and joy which arise in dependence of consciousness. That is a gratification in the case of each of these khandhas. There is a sense with each of these khandhas there's some joy and happiness there. It's fun to be conscious. It's fun to do things. There's a joy in being in control. There's a joy in feeling, going out there and feel the sun on your face. Feel the wind through your cheek. Go out there in the early morning and feel the cold biting air. Even masochists. There's a joy in it somewhere or other, going out in the early morning. That is the gratification. What is the danger? All of these things are impermanent, suffering and subject to change. That is the danger, because they're impermanent. You can't hold them, you can't control them. They keep changing. What is beautiful fades away from you. It's the frustration of being out of control. How many of you feel frustrated about relationships? You tried so hard, it's not working. Why? It's not meant to work. What do you expect? Oh, I was sick. Why? What have I done wrong? What do you expect? You've got a body. Get sick. What do you expect? That's the suffering. And what is the escape? It is the removal of approval, this desire, and desire, lust, for these things. That is the escape. You remove your approval, acceptance, consent, and desire for body, for feelings. Just let them go. Leave them alone. But I don't approve of them. They can just disappear. And that's why, that's the escape. When you remove your desire and acceptance of these things, what happens? You go into deep meditation. That's the process of escape. The desire and lust for these things, when it's removed, the 5 khandhas start to fade away and disappear, as we'll soon see in a few moments. Yeah. Yeah, but after a while, if you're letting go, you don't agree to these things. After a while, there comes a moment, instead of just consent, there's like a disconsent. This is called nibbida. It's called here like revulsion. No, take it or leave it is consent. This is leave it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't get you over the line now. Okay. Venerable Sir, how does one know, how does one see, so that in regard to this body with its consciousness, this is what I say, another way of looking at the 5 khandhas is body with consciousness, saviññana Nikaya. How does one see in regard to this see and know, in regard to this body with its consciousness and all external signs, that there is no I-making, mind-making, an underlying tendency to conceit. Here conceit has a technical meaning of measuring oneself. I am better than the rest. I am worse, or I am equal. How much does that run your life? Worrying about what other people think of you, measuring yourself, trying to succeed, trying to be somebody. That's called conceit. It's wonderful to overcome. You go on. Yeah, but yeah. Yeah. Correct, yeah. Well, they're included, but it's something you do as well. That's a very good point, though. Yeah, it's also school teachers as well. Teaching me to think all the time. Oh, I used to be so peaceful before I went to school. Anyway, come on. Bhikkhu, any kind of material... This is how one works, how one looks. So there's no I-making. One doesn't actually make more I. One doesn't make more mind, more possessing. Bhikkhu, any kind of material form, whatever, whether past or present. Actually, there's a mistake here in this. I checked with the party. They missed out whether past, future, or present. They missed out the future there. It's quite an obvious mistake. It's just a typo. Bhikkhu, any kind of material form, whatever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. One sees all material form as it actually is, with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Imagine doing that. All your possessions, your handbag, your car, this is not mine. This is not me. It's not self. You don't judge yourself by your car. Vedana, feeling. Any kind of Vedana whatsoever. Whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. One sees all this feeling as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Wouldn't that be nice? Every time you have a pain, it's not yours. It's not my pain. You can be sympathetic to yourself. Oh, you poor thing. But it's just like you see someone in hospital in great pain. It's not quite the same as having the pain yourself, is it? Can you do that with your own pain? This is not mine. This is not me. This is not myself. Okay. But you always got the pleasure as well, remember. When do you get the pleasure? This is the real me. Any kind of perception whatsoever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, one sees all perception as it actually is with proper wisdom thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Any kind of will whatsoever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, one sees all will as it actually is with proper wisdom thus: this is not mine, it's not me doing this, I'm not giving this talk. This I am not, this is not myself. Any kind of consciousness whatsoever, any kind of knowing whatsoever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, one sees all knowing, all consciousness, all mind, as it actually is with proper wisdom thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. The knowing is not you. It's just a process. A magician's trick. Then in the mind, any questions about that? Okay, now it's a nice little interesting part here. Then in the mind of a certain monk, this thought arose: so it seems, this body is not self, feeling is not self, perception not self, formations are not self, consciousness is not self. What self then will action done by this not self affect? In other words, I can do anything I want, there's nobody in there. So there can't be any results of karma because there's nobody in there, no self to affect. It's just being smart. Then the Blessed One, knowing in his mind the thought in the mind of that monk, addressed the monk thus: it is possible, monks, that some misguided man here, obtuse and ignorant, but his mind dominated by craving, might think that he can outstrip the teacher's dispensation thus: so it seems the 5 khandhas are not self. What self then will actions done by a not self effect? Now, monks, you've been trained by me through interrogation or question and answer, basically, on various occasions in regard to various things. Monks, what do you think? Is material form, this is body, permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Like, even if in a heaven world, imagine the most wonderful heaven world. If it's impermanent, it's not good enough. It has to be there forever to be real happiness. Is what is impermanent, suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus: this is mine, this I am, this is myself? No, Venerable Sir. What do you think? Is feeling, perceptions, formations, consciousness, all these khandhas, knowing, doing, are these things permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent, suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus: this is mine, this I am, this is myself? No, Venerable Sir. 3 characteristics of existence: impermanence, suffering, non-self. Apply to these 5 khandhas. Therefore, monks, any kind of material form, whether past, future or present, as before, any kind of feeling, perception, willing, knowing, should be seen with proper wisdom thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Paragraph 17. Seeing thus, a well-taught noble disciple becomes not disenchanted. In the Samyutta Nikaya, we changed that word to revulsion, on my suggestion. Bhikkhu Bodhi agreed with it. Seeing thus, a well-taught noble disciple becomes revolted, not disenchanted. That's the wrong word. The word here is nibbida. The reason why I convinced Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi to change it to revolted, because they gave a decent example of it. Just like a person with a sore, oozing pus, they wouldn't become disenchanted by it. They'd become revolted by it. There's a problem, they've got to do something about it. Seeing thus a well-taught noble disciple, they're not approving, it's not take it or leave it anymore. They become revolted. They're in a problem. It's like being in jail. You find all this thing you thought it was a wonderful place, you've been in a jail all these years. You're revolted by being in jail. You don't take it or leave it. I can stay in jail, or maybe I'll get out. Who cares? Equanimity. You have to escape. So they become revolted by it. Aha! Yeah, no. There is the aversion of ill will, wanting to hurt somebody. But if I saw, say, you being beaten up and abused, I would look there and say, oh, I can't have aversion towards what's going on. Let it go, let it be. Be equanimous. I'll try and help you. I'll try and do something. If you saw a kid being beaten or being sexually abused, would you be equanimous? You'd be revolted by it. That is actually the right thing. So sometimes that we've put this whole thing about we should have no desires, no aversions, be just like robots, whatever happens in the world. That's actually not correct Buddha's teachings. That's just too superficial. Not ill will, but the aversion here is the positive aversion which takes you off the wheel. This word nibbida, for those of you who read the latest journal, I think it was in there that I gave the simile. This is samsara, the wheel of existence. This is the samsara's ejection seat, or ejection button. You have to press the nibbida button, and then you get ejected out of samsara. Was that in the last journal, or was it in the next one coming up? How many people have read that latest journal? Only one, okay. But anyway, it's in one of them. Are you? Okay. I think it's. I'm not quite sure if it's in that one or if it's in the next chapters. But it's a lovely simile. To get off the wheel, you've got to actually push yourself out. You need an ejection button. A natural result of seeing suffering, seeing the cause. It's not coming from a self. A natural cause and effect sequence. Nibbida. What am I doing this for? You go out. It's like many people, once they start getting into this Dhamma business, they really get into it. Some of the things you used to do, a few years ago, you get revolted by. What do I do that for? Why do I spend my time in bars or pubs? It's yucky. It is an unself-made action. It's part of the khandhas, but it's not coming from you. Correct. Well, if it's the causal condition is you, that there's a self in there somewhere, but it's just the result of seeing a problem. It is indeed, because when there's a self in there, it just gets so complex. This is a natural process. You've got no choice. It's the same as the simile of a person, say, going to Penang in the aircraft, and they run to the front of the plane, thinking they're going to get there quicker. Or they hang out, they look at the people who hang out in the back of the plane. You lazy people, you should put more effort to get to Penang. It's a process, an eightfold path. When you get on that eightfold path plane, Buddha Air, you just get there anyway. So all this thinking, should I do this, should I do that? I'm going to ricochet. So sure, sometimes you go to the front of the plane, you ricochet to the back of the plane, and then you go to the front of the plane again. It's all sort of irrelevant stuff. Yeah. Eightfold path, yeah. Eightfold path, seeing the Dhamma. You got no cause. This is just what happens. Because, on this paragraph 17, seeing thus the well-taught noble disciple becomes revolted with the five khandhas. Being revolted, they become dispassionate. Other word for dispassion, the things fade away. Through dispassion, you don't care about these things anymore, they're gone. The mind is liberated. When it's liberated, there comes the knowledge. It is liberated. Enlightenment always comes with the realization. There is enlightenment. You cannot be enlightened and not know. Enlightenment always comes with the result. There is enlightenment. You don't say, I am enlightened. You understand birth is destroyed. The whole life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. The purpose of life is completed. there is no more coming to any state of being. This is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. Now, while the discourse was being spoken, through not clinging, the minds of 60 monks were liberated from the taints. They were fully enlightened. Anyone here? If anyone pulled your hand up, you'd have missed the point. It's not that I am enlightened, just birth is destroyed. Okay, any questions on that? Very powerful, very deep, very wonderful Sutta of the Buddha. Yeah, go on. Yeah, you get on the stream. In the stream, you have to get on that. But that's actually before that. It's even like not just it's one on the part of being a stream winner. That those are also on the plane. It's almost like they're on the departure lounge. They're not really on the plane, but they've got no choice now. They can't go back through customs and immigration. They've got to get on the plane. That's a very hard one to actually see, because you don't really know if you're in the departure lounge, so you can get on the plane. It's only when the stream winning, the attainment of the overcoming of Sakkaya Ditthi. That's the experience. But there's many more people than you think who are actually in the departure lounge. You've got enough faith, you've got enough wisdom, you get enough good teachings that you've got what it takes. So I expect many to actually, if they don't get it now, to at least get it on the time of their death. I expect many to be in the departure lounge. So I say, if you don't want to go to Nibbana, for many of you, I'm sorry, it's too late. I do apologize. No, I don't. Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's call it a day now. So thank you for listening to those. Those of you who've got the piece of paper there, if you wish to take it back with you, you're most welcome to keep that as a souvenir. If I can have the book back though afterwards. But we'll finish off by paying respects to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhaṃ Bhagavantaṃ Abhivademi Sawakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami